In the year 2247, Earth stood as a shining example of human achievement. The planet was no longer divided by countries or borders. Instead, it was united under one government that worked tirelessly to ensure peace and progress. Colonies on Mars, Europa, and even Titan thrived, showing how far humanity had come since its early days of exploration. People lived comfortable lives, enjoying technology that once seemed impossible. But despite all this success, trouble was brewing far beyond Earth's reach. One day, a message arrived from deep space. It wasn't friendly. The transmission came from an alien empire called the Krylos Dominion, a powerful force known for conquering weaker civilizations across the galaxy. Their message was short but terrifying. Surrender or face destruction. Humanity had only 5 days to decide. Fear spread quickly among the population. Many wondered if Earth's defenses were strong enough to stand against such a mighty foe. Others hoped the situation could be resolved peacefully without bloodshed. Commander Jack Dawson, stationed at Lunar Base Alpha, felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. A tall man with sharp eyes and graying hair, Jack had spent most of his life serving in the military. He knew better than anyone how outdated Earth's weapon systems were compared to what the Krylos might bring. Still, he refused to give up hope. Working alongside him was Lieutenant Samantha Brooks, a young woman with a quick mind and steady hands. She specialized in strategy and had already started brainstorming ways to defend Earth using whatever resources they had available. Samantha believed there was still a chance. "We may not have their advanced tech," she said during one of their late-night planning sessions, "but we've got something else. Creativity. We can use our old satellites and repurpose them into traps." Jack nodded slowly, liking where her thoughts were heading. Together, they began working on a plan to fortify Earth's orbital defense grid. They also reached out to Colonel Ryan Mitchell, who commanded the Terran Defense Force stationed on Mars. His input would be crucial if things went south. As news of the Krylos threat reached the public, panic erupted. Cities buzzed with activity as people prepared for the worst. Some packed their belongings and fled to underground shelters, while others gathered in streets, demanding answers from their leaders. President Laura Hayes tried to calm everyone down by addressing the world through a live broadcast. Standing behind a podium in the United Nations building, she spoke firmly yet reassuringly. "We will not surrender," she declared. "Earth is our home, and we will protect it with everything we have." Despite her words, fear lingered. Jack and Samantha noticed it in the faces of their fellow soldiers and engineers. Even so, work continued around the clock. Mining drones normally used for asteroid harvesting were modified into makeshift weapons platforms. Civilian pilots volunteered their ships to assist in reconnaissance missions. Among them was Ethan Cole, a private pilot who owned a small cargo vessel. Though inexperienced in combat, Ethan wanted to help however he could. Days passed, and tension grew thicker with each passing hour. Everyone knew time was running out. Would diplomacy save them? Or would war become inevitable? No one had the answers, but one thing was certain. When the Krylos arrived, humanity would fight. Not because they thought they'd win, but because giving up wasn't an option. As Jack looked out at the vast expanse of space from Lunar Base Alpha, he whispered softly to himself, "Come on, Earth. Let's show them what we're made of." The Krylos fleet arrived earlier than anyone expected. Without warning, hundreds of massive ships emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars like a dark storm cloud spreading across the sky. Their vessels gleamed with an eerie metallic sheen, each one larger than any human-made ship ever constructed. At the center of the formation loomed the flagship, a colossal behemoth that seemed more like a floating fortress than a spacecraft. Leading this armada was Admiral Vornak, a ruthless leader who had crushed countless civilizations before turning his sights on Earth. On Lunar Base Alpha, alarms blared as sensors detected the incoming fleet. Commander Jack Dawson rushed to the command center, his heart pounding. The room buzzed with frantic activity as officers scrambled to gather data and relay it back to Earth. Lieutenant Samantha Brooks stood beside him, her face pale but determined. "They're here," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her fingers flew over the control panel, trying to analyze the size and composition of the enemy forces. It didn't take long for them to realize the grim truth. Humanity was hopelessly outnumbered. Back on Earth, President Laura Hayes watched the same readings from her secure bunker beneath New York City. She clenched her fists tightly, fighting back waves of fear and doubt. Though she had promised the world they would stand firm, seeing the sheer scale of the Krylos fleet made her question whether resistance was futile. Still, she couldn't give up. Not now. Summoning her courage, she contacted Colonel Ryan Mitchell on Mars. "We need every available resource ready to deploy," she ordered. "This is it." As the Krylos fleet approached Earth's orbit, their intentions became clear. Without hesitation, the flagship unleashed a devastating salvo of energy weapons, targeting satellites and communication hubs. Explosions lit up the night sky as vital infrastructure crumbled under the assault. Panic spread across the globe as people realized the invaders weren't interested in negotiations. They were here to conquer. Cities fell into chaos, with millions fleeing for safety while others braced themselves for the worst. But humanity wasn't entirely defenseless. Thanks to Samantha's quick thinking, the humans launched a counterattack using repurposed mining drones. These small, agile machines swarmed toward the smaller Krylos vessels, latching onto them and disabling critical systems. The tactic caught the aliens off guard, creating confusion within their ranks. For a brief moment, it seemed like the humans might actually hold their own. Civilian pilot Ethan Cole played a key role during this chaotic skirmish. Flying his modified cargo ship, he darted through the battlefield, gathering valuable intelligence and relaying it back to Samantha. His actions allowed the military to adjust their strategies in real time, making the most of their limited resources. Despite being an amateur, Ethan proved surprisingly skilled at evading enemy fire, earning respect from seasoned soldiers. However, the victory came at a heavy cost. Several orbital stations were destroyed, taking hundreds of lives with them. Among the casualties were brave men and women who had stayed behind to operate defensive turrets, knowing full well they wouldn't survive. News of these losses reached Jack just as the initial wave of attacks subsided. He sat alone in his quarters, staring at a photo of his family, feeling the weight of responsibility crush down on him. Each death weighed heavily on his conscience, but he forced himself to stay focused. There was no time for grief. Not yet. Samantha, too, struggled to process the devastation. She had always believed in finding creative solutions, but seeing so much destruction made her wonder if clever tactics were enough against such overwhelming odds. Still, she refused to let despair take hold. Instead, she poured all her energy into planning the next phase of defense, vowing to honor those who had sacrificed everything by keeping the fight alive. As the dust settled, both sides regrouped. The Krylos may have suffered minor setbacks, but their main fleet remained intact. Humanity, on the other hand, was battered and bruised, but not broken. Jack glanced out the window at the distant glow of Earth below. "We've got one shot left," he muttered, and deep down, he knew they'd have to make it count. The battle had only just begun, but already the cost was staggering. The Krylos fleet regrouped after the surprise attack from Earth's repurposed mining drones. Admiral Vornak, furious at the unexpected resistance, ordered his ships to tighten their formation and focus their firepower on key targets. This time, they wouldn't hold back. The flagship unleashed another devastating barrage, targeting Earth's remaining satellites and orbital stations. One by one, the defenses that humanity had relied upon crumbled under the relentless assault. Commander Jack Dawson watched helplessly as explosions lit up the darkness of space. Each burst represented lives lost, men and women who had stayed behind to man the turrets, knowing full well they might not make it out alive. His jaw clenched tightly as he turned away from the viewport, unable to stomach the sight any longer. Lieutenant Samantha Brooks stood nearby, her face pale but resolute. She was working furiously at her station, trying to reroute power to damaged systems and keep what little remained of their defenses operational. "We can't keep this up," Samantha said finally, breaking the tense silence in the command center. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to mask it with determination. "Their weapons are too powerful. If we don't do something soon, they'll break through completely." Jack nodded grimly. He knew she was right. Their current tactics were buying time, but time wasn't enough. They needed a game changer, a way to turn the tide before it was too late. That's when Samantha remembered something buried deep in classified files. Project Eclipse. It was an old weapon designed decades ago during humanity's Cold War era, long before anyone imagined facing an alien invasion. According to the records, it was capable of generating a massive electromagnetic pulse, EMP, strong enough to disable all electronic systems within its range. If they could activate it, it might cripple the Krylos fleet, at least temporarily. But there was a catch. Project Eclipse was hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean, far from any active military bases. Worse still, activating it required someone to physically enter the facility and manually trigger the system. Given the circumstances, it would be a suicide mission, or close to it. Jack didn't hesitate. "I'll go," he said firmly, meeting Samantha's worried gaze. She opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off. "There's no one else. You're needed here to coordinate the rest of the defense effort." Samantha reluctantly agreed, though her heart sank at the thought of sending him into such danger. Together, they devised a plan to get Jack to Earth safely using a civilian pilot's ship. Ethan Cole volunteered immediately when he heard about the mission. Though inexperienced in combat, Ethan had proven himself resourceful and brave during the earlier skirmishes. With his modified cargo vessel, he offered the best chance of slipping past the Krylos patrols undetected. As Jack prepared to leave Lunar Base Alpha, he shared a quiet moment with Samantha. "Take care of things while I'm gone," he said simply, placing a hand on her shoulder. She nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Come back alive," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, without another word, Jack boarded Ethan's ship, and they launched into the void. The journey to Earth was fraught with peril. Krylos fighters patrolled the area, forcing Ethan to weave through debris fields and take risky shortcuts to avoid detection. More than once, they narrowly escaped destruction, their ship shaking violently as enemy fire grazed their hull. Despite the danger, Ethan remained calm, his hand steady on the controls. "Almost there," he muttered under his breath, his eyes glued to the navigation screen. When they finally reached Earth's atmosphere, the sight below was heartbreaking. Cities burned, oceans churned with debris, and smoke clouded the skies. But amidst the devastation, Jack felt a flicker of hope. Somewhere beneath those waves lay humanity's last chance. As Ethan guided the ship toward the coordinates of Project Eclipse, Jack tightened his grip on the harness of his seat. Whatever awaited them down there, he knew one thing for certain. Failure wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. The descent into the Pacific Ocean was anything but smooth. Ethan's ship shuddered violently as it broke through the thick clouds and plunged toward the water below. The impact sent a spray of foam shooting up around them. And for a moment, everything inside the cockpit rattled uncontrollably. Jack gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white, while Ethan focused intently on stabilizing the vessel. Once submerged, the ship's lights cut through the murky darkness, revealing an eerie underwater world filled with drifting seaweed and strange creatures that darted away from the intruding craft. Navigating the ocean floor wasn't easy. The coordinates they had been given led them to a series of underwater tunnels, narrow passages carved out by centuries of tectonic activity. These tunnels were meant to protect Project Eclipse from discovery, but now they posed a serious challenge. The ship's sensors struggled to map the twisting path ahead, and more than once, Ethan had to make split-second decisions to avoid jagged rocks or sudden drops. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath, sweat beading on his forehead. Jack didn't respond. He simply stared straight ahead, his mind focused on the task at hand. As they ventured deeper, The ship's systems began to falter. The pressure outside was immense, and parts of the hull groaned ominously. Then, without warning, one of the engines sputtered and died. Alarms blared inside the cockpit, filling the confined space with an urgent, high-pitched whine. Ethan worked frantically to reroute power, but it was no use. The engine was gone. "We're not going to make it," he said, his voice tinged with panic. But just as hope seemed lost, a faint light appeared in the distance. It was dim and flickering, but unmistakably artificial. They had found the entrance to Project Eclipse. With the remaining engine, Ethan guided the ship toward the light, scraping along the tunnel walls in the process. When they finally emerged into a large cavern, both men let out a sigh of relief. The facility loomed before them, its metal structure rusted and worn but still intact. This was humanity's last chance. Inside the facility, things grew even more complicated. The air was stale and cold, and the corridors were dark, except for the occasional emergency light blinking weakly. Jack and Ethan moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Along the way, they discovered signs of past habitation, abandoned workstations, scattered papers, and tools left behind, as if the workers had fled in a hurry. But there was no sign of life. Or so they thought. In one of the control rooms, they stumbled upon someone who hadn't fled, Dr. Emily Ross. She was a scientist who had been stationed at the facility years ago, tasked with maintaining Project Eclipse. Her hair was disheveled, and her clothes were torn, but her eyes sparkled with determination when she saw Jack and Ethan. "You're here to activate the weapon, aren't you?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. Jack nodded, explaining the dire situation above. Without hesitation, Emily agreed to help. Her knowledge of the ancient technology proved invaluable as she guided them through the labyrinthine facility. Reaching the core of Project Eclipse required descending deeper into the complex. The journey was treacherous, with collapsing floors and malfunctioning elevators slowing their progress. At one point, the group nearly ran out of oxygen when a ventilation shaft clogged with debris. But Emily remained calm, using her expertise to jury-rig a temporary fix. "We don't have time to stop," she reminded them, her voice steady despite the danger. Finally, they'd reached the heart of the facility, a massive chamber housing the EMP generator. The machine hummed softly, dormant but ready to awaken. As Jack and Emily worked together to prepare the activation sequence, Ethan kept watch near the entrance, scanning the shadows for any signs of trouble. Outside, the Krylos fleet had detected unusual energy readings emanating from the area and dispatched a team to investigate. Time was running out. When the final switch was flipped, the generator roared to life, vibrating the entire chamber. A low-frequency hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Jack turned to Emily, concern etched on his face. "You should come with us," he urged. But Emily shook her head firmly. "Someone has to stay and make sure this works properly," she replied. "Besides, I've been down here too long to leave now." Before Jack could argue further, she ushered him and Ethan toward the exit. As they sprinted back through the tunnels, the facility began to collapse behind them. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling, and water rushed in from cracks in the walls. By the time they reached the ship, the cavern was flooding rapidly. Ethan fired up the remaining engine and shot toward the surface, narrowly escaping the destruction below. Behind them, the EMP detonated, sending a pulse of energy rippling outward. For a brief moment, the ocean lit up with an otherworldly glow. And then everything went silent. The electromagnetic pulse from Project Eclipse surged outward like an invisible wave, spreading across the planet and into space. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The skies above Earth flickered with strange lights as the EMP disrupted the Krylos fleet's advanced systems. One by one, their massive ships faltered, their glowing engines dimming until they were nothing more than lifeless hulks drifting in orbit. The once imposing flagship, which had dominated the battlefield with its sheer size and firepower, went dark and silent. On Lunar Base Alpha, Lieutenant Samantha Brooks watched in awe as the readings on her monitors confirmed what she'd hoped for. The Krylos fleet was disabled. Her hands trembled slightly as she relayed the news to Colonel Ryan Mitchell on Mars. "It worked," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Their ships are down." Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. She knew this victory came at a cost. Jack and Ethan were still out there somewhere, and she hadn't heard from them since they entered the Pacific Ocean. Meanwhile, Jack and Ethan's ship broke through the water's surface just as the EMP hit. The vessel rocked violently, its remaining systems struggling to cope with the sudden surge of energy. Inside the cockpit, both men shielded their eyes as the sky lit up with an eerie glow. When the light faded, they looked at each other in stunned silence. "Did we do it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the horizon, where the stars were beginning to reappear. After a long pause, he nodded. "We did." But there was no time to celebrate. The Krylos ships might have been immobilized, but they weren't destroyed. Without power, the alien vessels floated helplessly in orbit, vulnerable targets waiting to be eliminated. Samantha seized the opportunity, coordinating a daring counterattack. She contacted every available unit, from Terran defense fighters to civilian pilots who had volunteered their ships, and directed them toward the crippled fleet. "This is our chance," she told the pilots over the comms. "Hit them hard and fast before they recover." Captain Lisa Bennett, a skilled fighter pilot stationed aboard one of Earth's orbital platforms, led the charge. With her squadron of agile interceptors, she dove straight into the heart of the Krylos formation, targeting key areas of their ships. The aliens, caught off guard by the sudden assault, scrambled to defend themselves. But without functioning weapons or shields, they were sitting ducks. Explosions erupted across the sky as human forces systematically dismantled the once mighty armada. Back on Earth, President Laura Hayes addressed the world again, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "The tide has turned," she announced. "Our brave soldiers and civilians have struck a decisive blow against the invaders. Let us honor their courage by finishing what they started." Her words inspired millions, reigniting hope in a population that had been on the brink of despair. As the battle raged above, Jack and Ethan made their way back to Lunar Base Alpha. Their ship was battered and barely holding together, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that their mission had succeeded. When they finally docked, Samantha was waiting for them. Her face lit up with relief as she saw Jack step off the ship, alive and well. For a moment, she forgot about protocol and threw her arms around him. "You made it," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack returned the embrace briefly before pulling away. "We all did," he replied, glancing at Ethan, who stood nearby, grinning despite his exhaustion. The fight wasn't over yet. Even as the Krylos fleet crumbled under the relentless assault, Admiral Vornak refused to surrender. From the safety of his flagship, he issued orders to retreat, vowing revenge. "This isn't the end," he growled, his voice cold and menacing. "Earth will pay for this defiance." As the surviving Krylos ships limped away from the battlefield, humanity let out a collective sigh of relief, but no one dared to lower their guard. For now, though, the immediate threat was gone. The skies cleared, and Earth's defenders regrouped, tending to their wounded and mourning their fallen. Jack stood outside the base, gazing up at the stars. He thought of Emily, who had sacrificed herself to ensure the success of Project Eclipse, and felt a pang of sorrow. Yet he also felt pride, not just for himself, but for everyone who had fought so fiercely to protect their home. "We showed them," he murmured softly, "and we'll keep showing them." With the Krylos fleet in disarray, humanity finally had the upper hand. The once dominant alien armada was now scattered and powerless, their ships drifting like broken toys in Earth's orbit. Admiral Vornak, humiliated but not defeated, ordered a full retreat. His flagship limped away from the battlefield, leaving behind dozens of destroyed vessels and countless dead. Though he vowed revenge, his words carried little weight for now. Humanity had won, for the moment. On Lunar Base Alpha, Commander Jack Dawson stood in the command center, watching as the remaining Krylos ships disappeared into the void. His body felt heavy with exhaustion, but his mind raced with thoughts of what came next. Lieutenant Samantha Brooks worked tirelessly beside him, coordinating cleanup efforts and ensuring no stray enemy forces lingered near Earth. Together, they began assessing the damage. Countless satellites were gone. Communication networks were crippled, and entire colonies had been left vulnerable without orbital protection. The cost of victory was staggering. Colonel Ryan Mitchell reported back from Mars, where his forces had played a crucial role in mopping up the remnants of the Krylos fleet. "We've secured the area," he said over the comms, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. "But it's going to take years to rebuild everything we lost." Samantha nodded silently, jotting down notes on her tablet. She knew rebuilding wouldn't just be about technology. It would also mean healing the wounds inflicted on people's hearts. Back on Earth, President Laura Hayes addressed the world once more. This time, her tone was somber yet hopeful. "Today, we faced an enemy unlike any we've known before," she said, standing before a backdrop of damaged cities and rescue workers aiding survivors. "And today, we proved that humanity is stronger than fear. We will rebuild, we will recover, and we will prepare for whatever comes next." Her speech resonated deeply with millions who had endured days of terror, offering them a glimmer of light after so much darkness. As celebrations erupted across the globe, Jack found himself unable to join in. He walked alone to a quiet observation deck, staring out at the battered blue planet below. Images of Emily Ross flashed through his mind. Her calm determination, her selfless sacrifice. She had stayed behind to ensure Project Eclipse succeeded, knowing she wouldn't survive. Ethan joined him after a while, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing one to Jack. Neither man spoke for a long time. They simply stood side by side, sipping their drinks and reflecting on everything that had happened. Samantha eventually found them there. She looked tired but determined, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "The President wants us to start planning for the future," she said softly. "New defenses, better tech, maybe even a way to track the Krylos if they come back." Jack nodded slowly, understanding the importance of staying vigilant. "We can't let our guard down," he replied. "But first, we need to take care of the people who fought for us. They deserve that much." In the days that followed, stories of heroism emerged from every corner of human space. Civilian pilots like Ethan Cole were hailed as heroes for risking their lives to gather intelligence or transport supplies. Soldiers like Captain Lisa Bennett became symbols of courage, having led daring attacks against overwhelming odds. Even scientists like Dr. Emily Ross, though unknown to most, were remembered by those who knew the truth of their sacrifices. Jack attended a memorial service held for the fallen, both military and civilian. As names were read aloud, tears flowed freely among the crowd. When Emily's name was mentioned, Jack bowed his head, whispering a silent thank you. Later, he approached Samantha, who was speaking with some engineers about improvements to Earth's defense grid. "You okay?" she asked gently. He forced a small smile. "I will be," he said. "We all will." Though the scars of battle remained visible, in ruined cities, empty seats at dinner tables, and the lingering fear of another attack, humanity began to move forward. Factories reopened, schools resumed classes, and families tried to find normalcy again. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but no one doubted they could face it together. After all, they had already proven they could stand against impossible odds. As Jack looked up at the stars one last time, he felt a strange sense of peace. Humanity had survived its darkest hour, and in doing so, had discovered something remarkable. Strength wasn't just about weapons or technology. It was about unity, resilience, and hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jack knew one thing for certain. they would face them as one. Months passed since the Krylos fleet retreated, and life on Earth slowly began to heal. The scars of battle were still visible, craters marked the surface of cities, and parts of the orbital defense grid remained offline. But progress was undeniable. Humanity had rallied together in ways no one thought possible. Engineers worked around the clock to repair satellites and rebuild communication networks. Colonies on Mars and Europa sent aid shipments to Earth, showing solidarity across the stars. Even civilian pilots like Ethan Cole found new purpose, joining the newly formed Terran Space Force to help defend against future threats. Commander Jack Dawson returned to his duties at Lunar Base Alpha, though he carried a quiet weight with him. He often visited the memorial wall that listed the names of those who had sacrificed their lives during the invasion. Emily Ross's name was etched there, alongside countless others. Each time he stood before it, he reminded himself of their bravery and determination. "We'll keep fighting," he whispered during one such visit. "For all of you." Lieutenant Samantha Brooks became a key figure in shaping Earth's future defenses. Her strategic mind earned her a promotion, and she led a team tasked with developing advanced technologies inspired by both human ingenuity and recovered fragments of Krylos tech. Though ethical concerns arose about using alien technology, Samantha argued that humanity couldn't afford to ignore potential advantages. "If we want to protect ourselves next time," she said during a meeting, "we need to learn from this war and adapt." Colonel Ryan Mitchell continued to oversee operations on Mars, ensuring the Red Planet remained secure while also contributing resources to Earth's recovery efforts. Under his leadership, Mars became a symbol of resilience, a thriving colony ready to support its home world. Soldiers under his command spoke highly of his dedication, often recalling how he stayed up late into the night reviewing plans and encouraging his troops. President Laura Hayes announced ambitious plans for the future. In an address to the United Nations, she unveiled Project Unity, a global initiative aimed at strengthening Earth's military capabilities while fostering international cooperation. "This isn't just about rebuilding what we lost," she declared. "It's about creating something stronger, better, and more united than ever before." Schools introduced programs teaching students about space exploration and defense, planting seeds of curiosity and courage in the next generation. Ethan Cole, now officially part of the Terran Space Force, trained daily alongside seasoned pilots. His natural talent and quick reflexes made him a valuable asset, and he quickly rose through the ranks. Off-duty, he spent time mentoring younger recruits, sharing stories of his harrowing journey to activate Project Eclipse. "You don't have to be fearless," he told them once. "You just have to keep moving forward, even when you're scared." As the months turned into years, humanity grew stronger. New ships rolled off assembly lines, equipped with cutting-edge weapons and shields designed to withstand another alien assault. Observatories scanned the skies constantly, searching for any sign of the Krylos returning. Admiral Vornak's promise of revenge lingered in the back of everyone's minds, but instead of living in fear, people prepared. They built shelters, stockpiled supplies, and trained volunteers to respond to emergencies. Jack eventually retired from active duty, choosing to teach young officers at the academy. On his first day, he stood before a classroom filled with eager faces. "War is never easy," he began, his voice steady. "But it teaches us who we are and what we're capable of. Never forget that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done, even when you're afraid." Samantha visited him occasionally, bringing updates on her projects. Together, they reflected on everything they'd been through, the losses, the victories, and the lessons learned. "We did good," she said one evening as they watched the sunset over Earth. Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah," he replied. "And we'll do even better next time." Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged battered but unbroken. The stars above still held mysteries and dangers, but Earth was ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together.